We're going to spend some time today talking about the 12 global challenges and talking about how those challenges affect each one of us on this planet. None of us are immune unless you happen to have a spaceship, and if you do, I'll see you afterwards. But unless you can leave this planet, we all are affected by what goes on the planet. Some things that may sound remote are really right here. And what we need to do is be aware of it, and we need to be able to deal with it. We need to be able to deal with it in challenging circumstances, and we need to be able to deal with things in a very creative way. I wanted to talk a little bit, though, about me. Who am I to be standing here talking to you about these things? About 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Creating a World That Works for All. And I wrote that book from the point of view of seeing a world that works for few, if any. I had the opportunity to grow up in America's underbelly. Camden, New Jersey, which at the time was Time Magazine's worst city in America. We're number one. There's no bragging rights for being from the second worst city in America. I was raised in the worst parts of the worst city in America. And I know, and I can remember from a really early age just thinking that this doesn't work. This isn't the way that human beings ought to live. That a couple of weeks ago, I was at a friend's house, and she had a little puppy, and the puppy was playing with something. And she says, "I bet you don't know what the puppy has." I said, "It's a chicken foot." And she said, "Well, how would you recognize a chicken's foot?" So we used to eat them. And she gave me this look that said, "Why would anyone want to eat a chicken's foot? There's no meat on a chicken's foot." And the answer is, nobody would want to do that. Why would anybody want to live on $1 or $2 a day? Well, the answer is nobody would want to do that. But 1/3 of our human family lives that way. Now, we have the ability to write that third off. We don't see them. Even when they're right in front of our face, we don't see them. And so we can pretend that our world exists in this Ozzie and Harriet splendor, okay? So when I was growing up, I could, we watched television. I could see that both Ozzie and Harriet looked like they were having fun. And I also could see that my world didn't look like that. So I was about 12 years old when someone gave me an understanding of why my world looked like that. And the person that did that was a guy named Malcolm X. And he said the reason that our world looks like this is because of white racism. So I started to create a world that works for all black people because all white people were fine. It took me going to college to realize that there were some white people in the world that weren't fine. And it took me coming out of college to realize there were very few people that were fine. That this world doesn't work for the people it purports to work for. Even the people that look like and act like and pretend that they're in power aren't the ones that this world is working for. That, and how the world is working or not working is a very profound issue that we'll be talking about in a bit. So out of all of this, I started to develop some ideas of how the world worked, and I want to share them with you right now. One of the things that I saw at that time was that the world operated from a mindset. Back when I was 12 years old, I called that the white power structure mindset, and I said all of you had that. Then when I got to college, some of my women friends were saying, no, this is the male patriarchy mindset, and all of you men have that, okay? And then I realized, wait a minute, all of us share this mindset. I can't look at the color of a person's skin. I can't look at their gender. I can't look at their world circumstances and see whether or not this person has this mindset. So I started looking at and exploring this mindset, and I started looking at what is the mindset that creates the problem, and then what is the mindset that resolves the problem. So I want to share that with you right now. The thing that my work revolves around is a concept that I call inclusivity. Now, by inclusivity, I am not talking about inclusion or inclusiveness or let's just kind of get a little bit closer together now. I'm sorry, 6 feet is close enough. I mean something very specific by that. I mean that the notion that I am inextricably linked to you. This notion pops up in every single society that I know of. This notion pops up in all of our wisdom traditions. We can look at, for example, what is hateful to you, do not do to others in Judaism. In Hinduism, the whole world is one single family. Do not hurt others with that which hurts yourself in Buddhism. Do unto others whatever you would have them do unto you, Christianity. And then in Islam, none of you is a believer until you love for your neighbor what you love for yourself. Over and over and over again, in every single culture, we see the same kind of a concept, that we are meant to be together. It is a universal truth, and it is universally ignored. Nobody does this stuff. You might do it on Sunday or Saturday or Friday, whatever your religious day is, and the rest of the time, we know how we operate. We operate with exclusivity. We operate as though we're separate from each other. This notion of inclusivity. The notion is we are one, that we're inextricably linked to each other, that we're linked with each other whether or not we know each other. We're linked with each other whether or not we understand each other. We don't have to share the same language or have the same background or the same history. We're linked with each other whether we like each other or not. I know that there are a lot of programs that try to teach cultural understanding and tolerance. I don't want anybody to ever tolerate me. And actually, I've been told by experts that I'm intolerable. That I want you to recognize that I'm your brother. And once you do that, you'll begin to treat me the way that in the right relationship with each other. Until you do that, whether you know me or not, whether you understand me or whether you even like me or not, becomes immaterial. That everything that an I do to you comes back to me in some way. If I treat you well, it comes back to me in some way. If I treat you poorly, it comes back to me in some way. And so once I recognize that, I can begin to act in a very different way. So let's go on to the 12 global challenges. These are situations that every single person on this planet, in some direct way or another, is being affected by. These are situations that we need to be thinking directly, and we need to be thinking creatively, and we need to be thinking about how we respond to them. We're going to go through relatively quickly and look at each one of them. One of the things with a handheld is that you only have one hand. Okay, the first challenge is security. In this challenge, we have to look at the issue of how the world is in conflict with itself right now. Conflict between countries, conflicts within countries, conflicts within neighborhoods. And the last challenge is a spiritual, cultural challenge. And I want to be careful to say I'm not talking about religion here. What I'm talking about is that I believe all human beings have a yearning for transcendence. And when we don't find that transcendence in society, something happens. We face suicide and suicidal societies. I came across a statistic by the World Health Organization recently that simply knocked me out. They looked at the issue of violence in human populations, and they looked at how humans die violently. They looked at three categories. One category is I would die, what they call group-to-group violence, where I'm killed in a war or gang warfare or something like that, but one group against another. Then they looked at homicide, which is one individual against another. Then they looked at suicide, and suicide is one individual against themselves. So of all human deaths by violence in the world, 54% of them were suicide. Now, that is a staggering number. We have an epidemic of suicide, and in this society and in no other society do we talk about it. A real quick stand-up exercise. I'm going to ask you two questions, and I'm going to ask you to stand up as answering the question. The first question is this. We have talked and talked and talked about the issue of terrorism in this country. We've talked and talked and talked about the issue of what happened on September 11th, 2001. I want you, if you know personally someone who died during the events of September 11th, meaning in the World Trade Center, at the Pentagon, or on the flight that was crashed into Pennsylvania, someone that you know personally, I want you to stand up. Okay. That's about typical for a group this size. Thank you. Now, I want you to stand up if you know someone who either committed suicide, seriously contemplated suicide, and that someone could be someone you know personally, and that someone could also be yourself. So if you know someone who either committed suicide or seriously has contemplated suicide, I want you to stand up. Okay. That's actually underpopulated. Okay. Usually I get almost everybody to stand up, so thank you. We have an epidemic that no one talks about because we don't want to admit the fact that this is a societal situation that needs a societal cure. But the cure can't be found in, well, just make some more money. Just go shopping. You can't find that cure that way. We have a morally degenerate society around the world. We lack a vision. How many of you have been to the cathedrals in Europe, have seen them?
You're looking at buildings that took 200, 300, 400 years to construct. That you're talking about a building that was designed by a society that was in league with its own future. Now come to this day, and we think 2050 is a long-range plan. Okay, so what we need to do is is to cure this lack of vision and cure this lack of a sense of belonging. I was a violent youth because I didn't believe I belonged to a society. I think that's true for most of the people who are acting out of violence. What we need to do is change that so that people recognize that they have a sense of belonging and recognize that society needs to change in order to give people a sense of where they belong.